Nearly 70% of Gaza war dead women and children, UN Rights Office says. Geneva, November 8. Reuters, the UN Human Rights Office said on Friday nearly 70% of the fatalities it has verified in the Gaza war were women and children, and condemned what it called a systematic violation of the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. The UN count covers the first 7 months of the Israel-Hamas conflict in the Gaza Strip that began more than a year ago. The 8,119 victims verified by the UN Rights Office in that 7-month period is considerably lower than the toll of over 43,000 provided by Palestinian health authorities for the full 13 months of conflict. But the UN breakdown of the victims' age and gender backs the Palestinian assertion that women and children represent a large portion of those killed in the war. This finding indicates a systematic violation of the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, including distinction and proportionality. The UN Rights Office said in a statement accompanying the 32-page report, "It is essential that there is due reckoning with respect to the allegations of serious violations of international law through credible and impartial judicial bodies, and that, in the meantime, all relevant information and evidence are collected and preserved," United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk said. Israel did not immediately comment on the report's findings. Israel's military, which began its offensive in response to the October 7, 2023 attack in which Hamas fighters killed about 1,200 people in southern Israel and seized more than 250 hostages, says it takes care to avoid harming civilians in Gaza. It has said approximately 1 civilian has been killed for every fighter, a ratio it blames on Hamas, saying the Palestinian militant group uses civilian facilities. Hamas has denied using civilians and civilian infrastructure, including hospitals, as human shields. It showed that in 88% of cases, 5 or more people were killed in the same attack, pointing to the Israeli military's use of weapons with an effect across a wide area. Although it said some fatalities may have been the result of errant projectiles from Palestinian armed groups. Ukraine is forced to confront a brutal Trump reality that it hoped would never happen. Bets were hedged, upsides conjured, and insurance policies crafted. But ultimately, most hoped it would not happen. Ukraine and its NATO allies have had for months to entertain the idea of a Trump victory, juggling conceits of a strongman U.S. president who might be a yet tougher ally, a dealmaker who might bring a favorable peace, or fresh eyes who might see a new end to a fatiguing war. This was but a comforting fiction. The road ahead for Kyiv is extremely stark. There should be no enduring mystery about what a Trump presidency means for Ukraine. Donald Trump has said he would end the war in 24 hours, but not how. He also said that Zelensky should never have let that war start, and dubbed him one of the greatest salesmen I have ever seen, who gets $100 billion on every visit to Congress. As of this morning, the fact these statements are wild exaggerations ceased to really matter. They became the warped lens through which the President-elect of the United States will perceive the largest conflict in Europe since the Nazis. Trump may appoint a cabinet that mildly adjusts the pace or tone of his instincts, but in the end he wants out. It doesn't matter that strategically Ukraine's war has so far provided the Pentagon with a comparatively cheap means of degrading its second greatest adversary at no cost to American life. It is an anathema to 2 of Trump's first-term dislikes, costly U.S. military engagement abroad, and upsetting Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin's initial response, that U.S.-Russia relations could not get any worse than they are now under President Joe Biden, surely belies glee. The year ahead was for Russia, according to most analysis, a careful gamble. Moscow has been positioning forces on the hilltops around Ukraine's military hubs in the Donbass, near Pokrovsk, Kurakhove, Chasiv Yar, to enable this winter the punishing squeeze of Kyiv out of the Donetsk region. Success in Donetsk could leave the path to major cities like Dnipro and Zaporizhzhia wide open, making the Ukrainian capital suddenly very vulnerable, and likely tipping the scales of the war. Yet the clock has been ticking on Russia's efforts. Western officials have suggested that its casualty rate, of perhaps 1,200 dead or injured a day, is unsustainable without another major unpopular Russian mobilization, and that next year Moscow could see a genuine crunch in armor production and ammunition. Putin played these recent cards hoping Trump would win, on the sure bet he would remain a man of instinct, isolationist and distrustful of America's long-term alliances. Trump is erratic and unpredictable, especially with complex and time-consuming matters like foreign conflicts. He prefers the fast fix of just leaving Afghanistan to the Taliban, or a Singapore face-to-face with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, or a drone strike on Iranian Revolutionary Guard commander Qasem Soleimani. We may never learn if he really studied the direction he imposes on Ukraine, or if he just never again wants to talk about the war, or spend money on it. Whatever the speed or detail of the Trump approach, the damage will still be palpable in the weeks ahead. I recall in December of last year, the massive blow to morale among Ukrainian troops when Congress stalled U.S. military aid for around 6 months. Frontline troops told me they would have to flee their positions without that help, even if they knew the Biden administration still wanted, in principle, to have their back. Now they must deal with the tables turned, the possibility that some aid still drips through from the Pentagon and European NATO allies, but that the Trump administration has instead taken a hostile posture at Kyiv's spine. Furthermore, Trump enters the White House at perhaps the most perilous time for Kyiv since the start of the war. Several analyses of the frontline show Ukraine has lost ground at an almost unparalleled pace in October, losing small villages that are inconsequential by themselves, yet in the round amount to a strategic setback that leaves the East acutely vulnerable. There has long been a policy flaw in NATO's approach. The Biden administration did not want to arm Ukraine forcefully enough that Russia might be militarily defeated, as it feared wider escalation. But Biden could also not countenance letting Russia prevail. Instead, the alliance sked Ukraine to endure, in the hope eventually Putin would crumble. It was the messy contradiction at the heart of the support for Kyiv, yet better than asking Ukraine to surrender. Without the will to fight, the belief that the battle is winnable, it is near impossible to ask Ukrainians to sit under shell fire in a trench or drive their armor at the deadly fire of enemy positions. Nobody wants to be the last soldier to die in a war. Nobody wants to lose their life fighting to protect a family who will likely live under Russian occupation anyway. Trump's victory may also complicate the very position of Zelensky. For years Zelensky has, to paraphrase Trump, been foremost an outstanding salesman of Ukraine's cause. Now he is weighed down with immense baggage from Trump's first term, when he was embroiled in Trump's request to investigate the Biden family. Can Zelensky still be that salesman? Is a fresh face in Bankova more likely to garner military aid, or strike a viable peace deal? Those tired of the Ukraine war, be they Kyiv ally or frontline soldier, should still not embrace the idea of a Trump-backed deal. Moscow has proven, in Syria in 2013 and Ukraine in 2015, that it negotiates to buy time to prepare for or fulfill its military goals. Putin will accept whatever territorial gains he can concretize. He already has the gains at the negotiating table, but he will then regroup and not stop. He has sold the war domestically as Russia facing the massed ranks of the entire NATO alliance. An overheated Russian economy, astronomical death toll and retooling of Russia's industrial base, all in service of that supposed fight, cannot simply be undone. Putin is increasingly needy of the war to retain his grip on power. This is apparent in his maximalist behavior towards Russia's neighbors in the last month. The recent turmoil in Georgia and Moldova, where pro-Russian forces have challenged pro-European movements with limited success, may see yet greater intervention from Russia in the months ahead. Putin is unlikely to suddenly abandon his hunger for greater regional influence. Remember his original motivation. This war began because he wanted to occupy Ukraine and keep it out of NATO and the European Union. The Russian blood expended over nearly 3 years likely demands a greater victory than simply keeping the territorial gains it already has. One vital lesson of the war will meanwhile face a grave assault. For the past 2 years, Putin's fiercest opponents have pushed the key idea that we need no longer fear Russia, that the Kremlin fanned the fear of its hulking bear as a psychological weapon to make up for its military decrepitude. Ukraine's unexpected resistance showed that fear was misplaced, and that Moscow had struggled to defeat a neighbor it once scorned as unable to fight. Now a Trump White House may ask the world to quickly swallow an apparently similar contention that is terrifyingly different, that the West should not be afraid of Russia as it does not really mean much harm. That would be Putin's greatest victory, and the West's sorest weakness. Former President Donald Trump took the stage with his family at West Palm Beach County Convention Center early Wednesday morning, to the raucous cheers of supporters. As Trump neared the projected 270 electoral votes needed to win, he declared victory as Vice President Kamala Harris's path to reach that threshold narrowed following projections for Trump in North Carolina, Georgia, and in highly prized Pennsylvania. At the time, ABC News had not yet projected a winner in the overall race, or in the 4 remaining swing states, as results continued to come in. "We overcame obstacles that nobody thought possible," Trump said. "And it is now clear that we've achieved the most incredible political, hey, look what happened, isn't this crazy? But it's a political victory. It's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this," he added. "I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president." He did not mention Harris. Trump told the crowd they ushered in a new golden age of America. "Every citizen, I will fight for you, for your family and your future," he said. "Every single day I will be fighting for you, and with every breath in my body." Before Trump spoke, his son Eric posted a photo of his father behind the scenes. Trump left for the convention center shortly after he was projected to win North Carolina. He rode over with members of his family and his top campaign leadership team. The former president packed the stage as he was joined by House Speaker Mike Johnson, Dana White, and his family. At one point, Trump referenced the assassination attempt against him in Butler, Pennsylvania, in mid-July. "Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason," he said. "And that reason was to save our country and to restore America to greatness. And now we are going to fulfill that mission together." Trump's running mate, Ohio Sen. J.D. Vance, and his family were also with Trump on stage. Vance delivered brief remarks of his own. "I think we just witnesses the greatest political comeback in the history of America," Vance said. Trump said Vance turned out to be a good choice, and said he took a little heat at the beginning, a reference to Vance's rocky rollout as the vice presidential nominee, prompting laughter from the audience. Trump also praised Elon Musk, the world's richest person who became one of Trump's most vocal supporters in these final months of the campaign. "Oh, let me tell you, we have a new star. A star is born," Trump said of Musk. The mood at Trump's watch party began to mirror a campaign rally once North Carolina was called, according to ABC News campaign reporters on the ground in Florida. The crowd also booed when the screens showed Harris campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond saying Harris be speaking at her watch party at Howard University. "Harris will instead address the nation later Wednesday," Richmond said.